So competition over resources led to conflict in the Americas. So remember, we're not the only country in the Americas who were competing for resources. In the Atlantic economy, we had an exchange of goods between African Americans and Native Americans, between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. This exchange of the economy continued, and it was called the Columbian Exchange. This is where we got corn and horses, and we traded one thing and the other between the Atlantic coast. European colonies focus on producing goods for Europe, also known mercantilism. What is mercantilism? It basically means trading. So if you look at this picture down here, is colonies trade with the mother country, there it comes back and forth. Colonies trade with the countries back and forth, but they do not trade with each other. Remember, back then everything was focused around the mother country. We even though we're in a different place, in a different location, we're still loyal to the crown. So sending stuff back, trading with the mother country, but not trading with each other. Each colony was kind of like its independent little state, their independent little island. They did not trade with each other. Hence, it was so hard in the beginning to create unity to create the United States later on. Goods that were valued in Europe were exported from the colonies, like fur, tobacco, and sugar, etc. New sources of labor. We have Native American labor, but it was hard to keep Native Americans because they knew the land, and of course we killed more than 90% of them with disease, European diseases. So we couldn't depend on them as a reliable source, and also they knew the land, so they just escaped. We also had indentured servants, people that came here, had right system, and worked the land for 7 years. But again, this is temporary because after 7 years, they're free to do whatever they want. So again, not stable labor. And finally, we have African slave labor, which is what came to define the United States even till today. And we're going to learn more about that in later lessons. The impact of trading on natives. There was a cultural changes. Native lost land, of course. Many Europeans sought to assimilate them, so we didn't respect their culture. We didn't want to learn about them. We wanted to make them look more like us. They're savages, so let's culture them. Let's make them more civilized. There was economic changes. Land was lost, and it was altered by Europeans. Remember, the planting of tobacco exhausted the land, so that land was wasted because of the harvest of tobacco. So now it changed the landscape. And demographic changes. It was a drastic decrease in population due to disease, especially in the natives. Remember, all those smallpox that killed off 90% of the Mayans, it devastated the Native American population. There was interactions between natives and Europeans. It fostered or promoted the growth of both accommodation and conflict. Europeans allied with native groups against opposite native groups. So the Native Americans, for the most part, did not ally with the Europeans. If they would ally with anybody, they would ally with the French because they were a little bit nicer, and the Dutch that were a little bit more friendly towards them. With the English, not so much. So, but some groups did ally themselves with Europeans. For example, the Iroquois, who were stationed in the Atlantic coast, so they were stationed around here. Since they were dealing more with the English, they did side with them a little bit more and traded more with them. This was important in the Paquette War, Metacommers War, and King Philip's War that we're going to talk about in future lessons, because this is where Native Americans uprised against the Europeans and fought to eliminate them. This is also important during the French and Indian War, also called the 7-Year War. Almost all natives were allied with the French and not the Iroquois. Why were they allied with the French? Remember, they were nicer with them. The Iroquois not that much because they had closer ties to the English. British and the colonial interests often varied. So both sides increasingly distrusted each other. So we started to see how the colonies, even though we had a close connection and we were still belonged to Mother England, we started to see differences between British, the crown, and the colonial interests. So the colonists wanted something different than what the crown wanted, than what the King of England wanted. The British colonists sought to expand, especially the post-7-Year War. The British forbade it. So after the 7-Year War, a war between the French and the Indians, remember they allied together, the British were like, damn, we just fought this whole big war. We can't keep getting into more conflicts with the Native Americans or the French in their territory. So they set a boundary of this line right here, where they told them, you colonists cannot expand over here. And if you're a colonist, you're starting to get a little mad because you're like, what the heck? I'm planting tobacco and I need more land. I need to expand. Who are you to tell me, if you're 300 miles away, what I can and cannot do? So we started to see a discontent between the British and the colonists. The frontier defense became a major issue. So the frontier, the people that outside of the 13 colonies, it became a major issue because we kept fighting with the natives, we kept fighting with the indentured servants, we kept fighting with the French and the Spanish. So like we had all these threats around us, so it was becoming a lot of work to keep the colonists protected. Hence Bacon's Rebellion. And the trade divided the two groups. The colonists smuggled to get around British taxes. So everything that was brought into the colonists, like tea or other sources that they needed, was being taxed by the British. So what a lot of colonists did is that they smuggled it in. So they found secret routes in the Atlantic to get to the Americas and to avoid taxes. So they basically try to like rig the system. And last slide, the British and the Native American conflicts. We're going to talk about this more in future lessons. It was caused over, of course, competition over land. We have all these outsiders coming in and taking your land that you were there for centuries. So obviously there was going to be conflict. It led to military conflict, like, for example, Metacom's War, also known as King Philip's War. There was a conflict between the natives and the British in New England. So where New York and Pennsylvania are at, there was Metacom's War happened between the natives and the New England and the British. The natives, of course, because they didn't have the weapons that the Europeans had, were defeated and not much of a threat thereafter in New England. So after Metacom's War, that was a major uprising, but they lost, and after that, the conflicts that happened weren't as big. The Spanish and the Native Americans resistance. So it wasn't just the British having problems with the natives, it was also the Spanish, of course. We have the Pueblo revolts, the Pueblo Indians, which are located in New Mexico, Arizona area. They successfully overthrew the Spanish for 12 years. So they actually a Pueblo revolt actually was a good thing for the natives. But eventually they gained control. But the good thing is that they did become more accommodating towards the Native American culture and particularly their religion, which is why we see a lot of Native American reservations and Native American culture in the Arizona, New Mexico area. And that is it.